I think employers have always got to be proactive in relation to setting up the right environment, the right work environment, clear policies, clear relationship building, a wellness focus. And anyone who may have an identified mental health problem would be treated the same as anybody else in terms of their rights to have leave, their rights to get support within the workplace, their rights to be supported in doing their job. But the proactiveness around mental health issues might be required under some circumstances, just as people with a disability might require a particular type of desk or a door or whatever. A person who's saying that there are certain triggers for he or she, those triggers should be considered in the workplace, provided that the person can still do their job. So it's just that sensitivity around you would have for any employee, except some issues are more obvious than others for some employees. The most immediate challenge is for employers to inform themselves more clearly about mental health problems, because there is a lot of stigma, there's a lot of mythology around, and so I think all employers should be seeking to get information about mental health issues, and recognising actually that for most people mental health problems are no different to be dealt with in a workplace than any other problem, any other illness, any other stress and so on. In the short term, I think that's going to take a lot of commitment by employers, because they have to overcome their fear of health and safety issues, Fair Work Australia considerations. That there are a lot of things that get in the way of employers having an objective view about mental health issues. Employers by nature will be risk averse, okay, and if you've got the wrong ideas about mental health issues, you are likely to be risk averse in a way that will harm the employee, create the wrong sense. So OC health and safety issues are there as guidelines, and employers have to operate within a dignity of risk environment for any employee, and recognise that they're not necessarily going to have to be risk averse or negatively reactive. And so getting the right information means that you take whatever information you get and you consider it in its application to that individual, and so you're talking to that individual also about what it is that they need, the support that they see themselves as needing as well. But I guess what I'm saying is there's information out there that can actually, if used wrongly, can increase stigma in the workplace. Well, the immediate benefit is increased productivity. If they're losing staff time, it means some jobs aren't being done, other staff are being affected, management's being diverted into dealing with problems rather than solutions, and so that's the key thing. But I think all organisations, all employers have an obligation to contribute to the wellness of our community. I mean, there's a citizenship role that management has, and managers want to get the best out of their employees. Managers actually want a healthy company or a healthy service. We all want to live in a healthy community. So I think that it's the productivity and the concept of wellness that should be driving, from a management perspective, activity. Look, I think within the workplace, the first thing that needs to happen is people need to talk to each other. If a person has a mental health issue, the employer, and wishes to disclose it, the employer then just needs to be able to have an informed discussion with that person to understand it, and that helps dealing with the planning process. Not everyone wants to disclose that they've got a mental health problem, and they have a right not to. The only reason it can become a problem is if it begins to affect their work, and that then is the employer's right to manage that performance. In the process of that, the information might emerge, and the employee just needs to be able to talk to the person. All of the other information that's around is only there to assist. It's not necessarily there to be the final view. The final view is formed by the employer talking to the individual and forming a plan by which the person can be supported in the workplace and the job done. Well, the first comment that I'd make is that culture eats innovation. Whether you're small or you're big, if you haven't got the right culture, that's an issue that you've got to address. So, and culture has to be led from the top. And what makes or breaks culture in an organisation is middle management. So, particularly in large organisations, if the organisation has a problem and it's wanting to change attitudes and create a different culture, it has to invest heavily in middle management, but it's also got to invest heavily in leadership, the CEO level and executive level. Unless middle managers are actively engaged in the process, they're going to be transmitting the wrong messages. That old thing about you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can have the executive absolutely passionate about an issue, but if the middle managers are not engaged with it, if they haven't got ownership of it, they're going to transmit the message differently. And that's why the focus has to be on wellness, on well-being in any agency, you see, because if you haven't got that culture of wellness, that attitude of owning your decisions, owning your engagement with the agency, then bullying can flourish very easily. And bullying is one of the biggest contributors to mental distress. Particularly if kids are bullied at school and so on, they can be bullied in the workplace and so on. People will internalise that. If the wrong culture's in the organisation, then people gang up against others, in staff rooms and do different sorts of things, so bullying's a very corrosive thing for people's health and well-being. And if there's one thing that managers or senior management needs to really attend to, it is the whole attitude and approach to bullying. Now, I know that there are real issues around that. There's got to be a strong education campaign for staff and for managers about bullying. Being given a lawful instruction is not bullying, But being given a lawful instruction in a way that belittles somebody is bullying. So staff need to understand that they're there to do a job, and actually managers have a right to expect it, and they need to work in a way that's productive. Managers have a right to give direction and own their authority, hold their authority, but not be authoritarian. So it's relationship based. Building the right relationships in a workplace is very important. Respectful relationship doesn't mean that everyone gets into groupthink and group hugs. You can have difference in a workplace, and you should, because that actually grows people's thinking and so on. But the relationships have to be respectful and informed and collaborative. Best practice in any setting can be translated into rigid application. Okay, so if I had a best practice piece of advice. It's about you talk to the individual and you together develop a plan for dealing with the issues in the workplace. So best practice is applied best when it's actually done in collaboration with the employee. Yeah. I think it's only just emerging in WA. In fact, I think there is developing, and our HR person will be involved in it, a network of HR managers in mental health settings. And so it's new. I know that Mental Illness Fellowship in South Australia has developed a contract, an agreement with their staff a staff member who might have a mental health issue, and it contains, I guess, advanced directives about if I'm becoming unwell, this is who I'd want to have, this is how I'd like to be treated in the workplace, this is the information I'd like to have disclosed. I think more agencies are starting to do that. But we as an agency haven't necessarily worked with employers on these issues. I would like us ultimately to be doing work with employers in that respect, definitely, yeah. We're still bedding down the Partners in Recovery program and a couple of other programs, but we are looking to diversify into much more working with other agencies, whether they're employers or other service providers, on a range of things, some of which would be education in the workplace. You know, life isn't static, you know, and the key thing for organisations is that the CEOs, the executive, they have to model the behaviour they want. You know, if they're not modelling it, then others aren't going to follow it. You know, what they'll do is they'll get pushback, you know, and that's why the tick box approach, you know, we've done this, we've done that, doesn't work, because it's got to be followed by behaviour that's, you know, building the respect and modelling what people are wanting. You know, we are a recovery-oriented organisation. We believe that people can recover. Now, if we didn't have a process by which we constantly reinforce that thing with our staff, we would simply fall back into old maintenance approaches to mental health. You know, we have a rolling education program for our staff. If we want them to believe in recovery and want the agency to focus on recovery, we've got to keep supporting that message, and that's what you've got to do in any workplace for whatever you're doing. If you want to change the culture from a bullying culture or a rigid stratified sort of culture or whatever, you have to model ways for staff to be able to deal with what it is they have no control over in a way that gives them at least emotional control and personal control in terms of their response and reaction. And in an organisation like DOTAG, you know, you've got your judiciary and you've got your public servants, so you've got a structure, and health's a bit the same with its mirroring of, you know, various power bases and so on. It is possible to work in respectful ways within those environments, but it does take investment by senior management. That they're getting a message out in the community that it's okay to talk about depression, you know, that actually it's more prevalent than you think, that it's part of the normal human makeup. So that's a good thing, and it's starting to get more acceptance in the community where people will talk about the fact. You know, Jeff Gallop, for example, very significant step forward. So that is a good thing. What isn't a good thing is if the messages get captured by vested interests like drug companies and so on. So the good thing is that people are now talking about issues like depression, they're accepting actually that it's important to talk about it. There's pressure on men to talk more about what's happening for them, and that needs to be encouraged. People are getting innovative about getting the message out. The group that we did at Richmond Fellowship is really at what you would describe the very heavily complex end. Usually schizophrenia. People have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and they've often burnt all of their bridges, their family, their relationship, their employment, and so on. Theirs is a more difficult message to communicate because they can recover. We see those recovery stories all the time. We're doing a lot of work with other agencies also about trying to ensure that their physical health is being attended to in a way that helps bring them more back into the community as people with healthy or better capacity to function as a citizen, but also to support them into getting jobs, getting their own housing. That's a more complex message to sell in the broader community because people in the broader community will just see these individuals as sick and never getting better. Well, the reality is that all agencies, whether they're public sector, private sector or whatever, should have a focus on having a healthy workplace. And that's emotionally and physically healthy, Now, not everyone can have a gym in their workplace or whatever, but they might, periodically, have yoga classes or, whatever capacity an agency has. But a focus on wellness is also about creating a healthy culture. Healthy cultures are created based on relationships. Now, as I said before, this isn't about people going around hugging each other and holding hands at lunchtime, It's about being respectful and accepting that they might not like. I've said this to several staff over the years. You don't have to like the person you're working with, but you do have to work with them. They don't have to be your best friends. Most people do like each other in the workplace, but where that doesn't occur, I think managers need to be saying this is about respectful relationships, And I mean, stating the obvious. In many respects, and it doesn't cost money to treat someone well. It doesn't cost money to treat them with respect, And people shouldn't have to hide behind the OSH Acts and other acts to get around actually having a decent relationship in a workplace. And I think sometimes employers do that. And you're right, they'll flick them off to EAP. EAP is there for people when they need something of a private nature to help them sort a problem out, Sometimes they might be happy to talk in a workplace about it, and sometimes it's not appropriate to talk in the workplace. So EAP has a really important role, but relationship building is everyone's responsibility. It's got to be led by example too, So this is not about budget. It's about decency, Managers sometimes confuse having a respectful relationship with an employee as compromising their authority. So they need to be supported in knowing how to hold their authority, but in a way that's actually still respectful of the people they're dealing with. And that's where I think things get tripped up sometimes, Managing difficult conversations, training in that is really important. Instead of sitting someone down and saying, well, you stuffed that up again. How could you have done that differently? Might be another way. What is it that we need to help you with to ensure this doesn't happen again? I think we've all seen Director Generals and senior executives behave in the most appalling ways, absolutely appalling ways, and the HR sections or corporate services sections have sat on their hands. And so when staff see that behaviour going on, well, they think, well, why, I don't trust them. They get bullied by very senior staff. They see those senior staff get away with it. And so they close down, and they learn actually you can get away with that. So that's where the leadership's quite important. And I think part of the solution is in the corporate services sector. They actually have to be braver and smarter and more competent about stopping senior executives and DGs from being bullies. I think for WA in particular, I think there's some serious work that needs to be done at Director General and Senior Executive Service level. I'm not saying it's rampant. I'm saying I have seen some really disgraceful behaviour by Director Generals and Senior Executives. And in the room have been the Executive Manager of Corporate Services who didn't, on occasions didn't address it. So what chance do agencies have when that part of the organisation that's supposed to actually preserve the dignity of the workplace actually lets it slip by? That happens. Some emotional intelligence in the workplace, and that's often what's lacking. That people aren't actually, using all different parts of their brain, because we can all follow rules and we can all apply rules, but it's how we apply them. And if we apply them with the understanding that a particular person actually needs a slightly different message or a little bit different support, that's not discriminating in the workplace, positively or negatively. That's just recognising that to get the best out of that individual for the job you need done for your unit to get their results, you just do it a little bit differently. You're not writing a new rule, you're not restructuring around an individual, but you're just applying emotional intelligence. And I think that's what's often lacking in the training of senior managers. The world centres around relationships. Every day. I mean, and if you've got a workplace where the relationships are dysfunctional or they're contaminated, it's going to affect productivity. It's going to affect the way you do your work.